My boyfriend's bed was covered in stuffed animals. Then I asked who gave them to him. I noticed the stuffed animals the first night I stayed over. They were lined up across his bed like they belonged there. A bear, a frog, a long plush cat. Not tossed aside or hidden in a corner, placed carefully, facing forward. At first, I didn't judge. Everyone has their quirks. But when I asked about them, he casually explained they were gifts from his male friends. He said it like it was completely normal, like I was supposed to nod and move on. I tried to. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. There were too many, and none of them felt random. Each one looked new, clean, intentional. Over time, I noticed something else. Every time I brought them up, his story shifted slightly. One was from a birthday. One was from a joke. One he couldn't remember at all. The details never stayed the same. Only the excuse did. What really got to me was how defensive he became. Not annoyed, defensive. Like the stuffed animals weren't just objects, but something he needed to protect. One night, while lying in bed next to him, I stared at them again. Lined up, watching. Almost like they were meant to remind him of something. Or someone. That's when I realized the problem wasn't that he had stuffed animals. It was that they felt like replacements. And suddenly, I couldn't stop wondering if they were really from his friends, or if they were proof of something he didn't want me to ask about. Because people don't usually keep gifts that carefully, unless they're afraid to let go of who they came from. After that night, I couldn't stop noticing them. The stuffed animals stopped blending into the background and started feeling like they were part of the relationship. Every time I stayed over, they were still there, lined up across the headboard, unmoved, untouched, like nothing in that room mattered as much as keeping them exactly where they were. I stopped asking questions because I already knew how he reacted when I did. Instead, I watched. I noticed how he never let me rearrange the bed. I noticed how, when I cleaned or folded blankets, his eyes would track my hands until I moved away from them. I noticed how he treated those stuffed animals with more consistency than he treated me. They were always protected. I wasn't. The longer I stayed, the more patterns I saw. Each time I spent the night, he subtly adjusted them before we went to sleep. If one fell over, he fixed it. If I leaned against one by accident, he repositioned it after. He never said anything, but his body language said enough. That's when it stopped feeling sentimental and started feeling ritualistic. I began to realize that those stuffed animals weren't decorations. They were reminders, anchors, proof that he had lived other lives before me and refused to let them end. One afternoon, I went over while he was out running errands. I hadn't planned to do anything. I just wanted to sit in the space and let my anxiety settle. But the quiet made everything louder. The room felt frozen in time, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't there anymore. I finally touched one. It was heavier than it should have been. Not in a dramatic way, just enough to feel wrong. I checked the seam and found a hidden zipper. Inside was a folded piece of paper, old and worn thin from being handled too many times. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was intimate in a way that hurt more. A message written by someone who trusted him enough to leave part of themselves behind. I didn't stop there. Another stuffed animal held a movie ticket stub. Another had a bracelet tied around the tag. Another had a small charm sewn into the paw. Every single one contained something personal, something meaningful, something that clearly didn't belong to a friend. That's when I understood. They weren't gifts, they were containers. Each stuffed animal represented a person, not just exes, but emotional entanglements. People he leaned on when he felt lost. People who made him feel needed. People who filled gaps he never learned how to sit with on his own. He didn't keep photos because photos fade. He didn't keep messages because messages can be deleted. He kept objects because objects don't argue back. When he came home and saw me sitting there, holding one of them, he didn't explode. He didn't accuse me of invading his privacy. He just froze. And in that moment, I realized he had always known this day would come. He tried to explain it calmly, like he'd rehearsed it before. He said he never cheated. He said nothing physical ever happened. He said those relationships were complicated and misunderstood. He framed it like he was just a deeply emotional person who held onto memories a little longer than most. But the truth was clearer than anything he said. He wasn't holding on to them because he missed those people. He was holding on to them because he missed how they made him feel about himself. Each one represented a version of him that felt important, desired, needed. And instead of growing past those versions, he preserved them. That's when it hit me. I wasn't his partner. I was his present. Just another phase that would eventually become a keepsake once I stopped meeting his emotional needs. I could already see it. A new stuffed animal, a new symbol, a new story he'd tell the next person about where it came from. I realized I had been shrinking myself without noticing. I'd stopped bringing up concerns. I'd stopped asking for reassurance. I'd stopped expecting consistency. All so I wouldn't compete with memories he refused to release. And I asked myself something that changed everything. If I stay, what part of me will he keep when I leave? The answer terrified me, so I didn't ask him to throw them away. I didn't ask him to change. I didn't try to prove that I was different. I understood something he never would. You can't build a future with someone who is still curating their past. I packed my things quietly. No dramatic goodbye, no screaming, no closure conversation, just distance. Weeks later, he reached out. He said the bed felt empty now. He said he finally understood what I meant. He said he'd started getting rid of them. But by then, it didn't matter, because the emptiness he felt was the same emptiness he'd been trying to avoid his entire life. And I wasn't going to be the one to fill it anymore. I didn't block him out of anger. I blocked him out of self-respect. And the strangest part is this. Once I left, I stopped thinking about the stuffed animals altogether, because they were never the real issue. The real issue was that I was trying to love someone who only knew how to collect people, not keep them.